Good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to talk about scales. Somebody messaged me yesterday, and so I'm just going to remind you that nobody knows about this conversation but you and I, so I'm not like outing you in the public. But somebody messaged me last night and said, "You're right about the scales, holy buckets." And so let me tell you how the scales work. Right? We talked about them before, but those scales, if you're an emotional eater, those scales are like, I don't know, kryptonite, because there's this illusion, like we have this panic about us that if we don't go away, like we're not going to know, right? And the deal is, I eat in my best interest regardless of the scales. It's not about the scales. I eat the way that I eat because that's what's nourishing to my soul. Like, my body performs better, my mind performs better, my body's gonna weigh whatever it's gonna weigh. I just want to eat foods that feel good, supportive to my body and to my mind. And personally, I am very highly sensitive to carbohydrates. They're not my friends. And so, when I eat those foods, like, my brain feels all foggy and mushy, my body does all kinds of crazy stuff, my acid reflux does all kinds of crazy stuff. And so it's like eating in your best interest. We're doing this 30 days of eliminating all this food because until you get that stuff out of your body, like, you just really don't know what's working and what's not. You're just like, putting food in the pie hole. And so it's like waking yourself up to what works, what doesn't, and see what you're having reactions to. So let's put that conversation aside. Let's talk about scales. So her situation, like, I really, at the end of the day, I just want you to eat in a way that works for you, right? And so I believe in whole foods. That's what God told me, is to eat whole foods, because we were eating counterfeit food and then wondering why we were sick and overweight, right? And so I'm about eating real foods. So she's using Weight Watchers, and there's a lot of people who are very accustomed to that system, and it's great, right? It gives you accountability, it gives you support, it's a great system. So, in Weight Watchers, like, you have to weigh every week, right? That's part of the story. But, my deal is once a month is plenty. There's a trainer here in town that I absolutely love, and she doesn't let her people weigh at all, ever. Like, she just completely takes the scales out of the equation because of what it mentally does to you. So, just know that, like, I'm not crazy. Sarah wouldn't let you weigh at all. But so what the email that I got last night was, "You're right, it happened. I weighed, I didn't lose as much as I wanted to lose, and so I wanted to go eat." And she said, "But I didn't choose to do that. I choose to just celebrate the accomplishment that I made." And so I thought it was just a great opportunity to just tap a little bit around the scales, just to kind of help you shift things a little bit. So, and if you're not having an issue with it, then you don't have to do this. If you are having an issue with it, then be blessed. And so I just want you to tap, when you think about the scales, and just tapping on the side of your hand. And so even though and so you to kind of cluing into your body, where it is in you. I'm just going to use my body, right? But the more personal you make this, the better this is going to go for you. And so when you think about that scales, what happens in your body? Like, I get this nervousness in the top of my stomach when I think about the scales. And so even though I get this nervousness in the top of my stomach when I think about the scales, I accept myself anyway. Even though when I think about the scales, how else am I going to know that this is working? But I accept myself anyway. Even though I get this anxious feeling in the top of my stomach, just thinking about the scales, how am I going to know if this is working or not if I don't get on the scales? But I'm safe right here, right now. This fear, how am I going to know if this is working if I don't get on the scales? Accept myself anyway. I have to get on those scales or I won't know if this is working. But I'm safe right here, right now. This anxious feeling in the top of my stomach when I think about the scales. Accept myself anyway. This anxious feeling in the top of my stomach when I think about the scales. But I'm safe right here, right now. This anxious feeling in the top of my stomach when I think about the scales. accept myself just as I am. Grab your wrist, take a deep breath. Peace. And so when you think about the scales, like, what's the story of the scales? You know, I'm not going to know if it's working or not. How I know if I lost weight, right? And so even though I'm so afraid I'm not going to know if this is working, if I've lost weight, but I accept myself anyway. I'm so worried if I don't get on the scales, I'm not going to know, but I'm safe right here, right now. So even though I have this panicked feeling, if I don't get on the scales, how will I know? But I accept myself anyway. This panic feeling, I have to get on the scales, safe right here, right now. Panic feeling, won't know if it's working, accept myself anyway. Panic feeling, have to get on the scales, I won't know if it's working, but I'm safe right here, right now. It's panic feeling, what about the scales? Accept myself anyway. Grab your wrists, take a deep breath. Peace. And so when you think about the scales, what do you notice next? And so I'm just going to tap. And so even though I've just been so programmed to get on the scales, I don't know how I'll measure it, but I accept myself anyway. Even though I've just been so programmed to get on the scales, how will I know what I weigh? But I accept myself just as I am. Even though I've just been so programmed to get on the scales, because I have to weigh a certain amount. I have that number in my head, but I accept myself just as I am. I'm just so programmed to get on the scales, accept myself anyway. I'm just so programmed to get on the scales, but I'm safe right here, right now. I'm just so programmed to get on the scales, but I accept myself anyway. This old program about getting on the scales. You know, if I was born in the 50s, they didn't use the scales back then. The scales was some novelty thing that you did at the circus or at the fair. I'm the crazy person that brought that home. This old story that I have to weigh my body. This old story that I have to weigh my body more than once a month. It's just this story that I've been telling myself. I can look in the mirror and I can see my face. I can see how my clothes fit my body. This story that I have to weigh my body. I'm open to the possibility that I can just eat in my best interest. My body will weigh what it wants to weigh. I can look in the mirror. I can see how my clothes fit. I have other ways of knowing if my body's changing. But I really choose to eat in a way that just makes me feel strong and clear-headed. I love myself enough. I choose to eat what makes me feel strong and clear-headed. And I begin to let it go. Grab your wrist, take a deep breath. That's a start. There may be more layers that you need to do in the middle before you do this last one, just to continue to like clear yourself. If you're still feeling anxious above a 3 when you think about the scales, like you need to keep wording it in there and doing tapping rounds so that you're clear, so that you know, I don't want anything having a hook on me, right? Because if I'm like so drawn to those scales and I'm so compulsive that I can't get away from them, then they have a hook on me. And so that's what I'm doing, the tapping to clear that, so that I have the power of choice as to whether I weigh or not, right? Because I mean, really, like back in the 50s is when, I think it was in the 50s, early 60s is when they took the scale from being a circus event and a fair event to like they priced them to where people had them in their homes. Before then, people weren't weighing. Like, we've done this to ourselves. So please know that. That's a modern age thing that we've developed. Like, I don't know why we thought we needed to weigh our body compulsively. I know what it is to weigh myself 3 times a day. Like, that's insanity. Even weighing once a day is crazy because you're a female. Your body's moving all the time. Like, you know, like whether you pooped or not, right? Like where you are hormonally, like where the moon is. Did you have enough water? Like, there's all these things that impact it. And so that's just like constantly telling your body, you got to perform, you got to perform, you got to perform. And the reality is, I feed my body in a way that makes me feel healthy and alive. That's the goal, not the performance of the scales. So I probably said this before, I'm going to say it one more time. You know, I've had to tell a lot of people, put your scales in the trunk of your car. You know, I don't see people pulling over on the side of the road weighing themselves. If that's what you got to do in order to just weigh once a month, just to, and I just say that like you know, at the same time, like there's no magic button. I'm just trying to break you from some habits that have been hijacking your brain around weight loss. And you know, about just a healthy body. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it wasn't too much information. Please leave your comments, because like, is this helpful? Is it not helpful? Like, what's going on with y'all? So anyway, hope you have a great day. Blessings.